Great, thanks very much for that. It's a fantastic intro, and as you say, it's been a fantastic couple of years as the Sustainable Procurement Pledge has ramped up and reaching a key milestone here in a number of different ways as well. I'm delighted to be able to chair the panel today, which is on the impact of technology on sustainable procurement and how it empowers sustainable procurement. And equally so, I'm really excited about the panelists. When we were looking to pull this session together, we very, very deliberately wanted to get people who are practitioners, wore the kind of the badges and the scars of implementing technology, and were able to share their how. And equally so to have a range of people on that experience different types of sustainable procurement. As we all know, sustainable procurement is very, very broad, and often, you can become too linear with it. So I'm joined by three great people who are basically going to talk about their individual stories and what's gone well and what could have gone a little bit better. So without further ado, I'll quickly drop across to the panel and let them to do their introductions. So Jennifer, maybe if I come to you first, or Jen, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
I'll skip quickly to Mark. Jenny frozen a little bit, so I'll go to you, Mark.
Hi. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everybody. My name is Mark Roberts. I'm the Director for Commercial Services at the Metropolitan Police here in London.
Brilliant. Jenny, back. Go for it.
Yeah, I hope so. Is it working? Is it okay now?
Yeah, great, thanks.
Okay, apologies for that. Jen Bennett, a technical director from the Office of the CTO at Google, and I lead our technology strategy for sustainability. So wonderful to be here.
Brilliant. And then Tom.
Yep. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am Tom Newbegin, work in GlaxoSmithKline's sustainable procurement team. So nice to meet you all.
Brilliant. Okay. So we're going to dive in at the deep end, and hopefully what we'll do as we're doing this is bring to life the journey that each of the panelists have been on as well. So maybe Mark, I'll go to you first, and it'd be great to hear a little bit about what you've been doing in the space, how technology has played a key role within that, and what in particular has gone well for you.
Yeah. So for us, I took over at the Met Police just over 2 years ago now, and luck plays a huge part in what we've done, and the reason I say that is what I'm going to describe today was actually due to a meeting facilitated by Lance, which was wonderful to have done that, where he asked me to attend a meeting to talk to an organisation that was coming to Europe, and who do I think they should talk to? It was 8:30, 16th of December 2019. The world was a very different place, and from that, it was that hour really convinced me of the aims and ambitions of this organisation were fully in line with my expectations of how I was seeking to transform the Metropolitan Police Commercial Services Department. The Met Police is the largest employer in London. It's the largest police force in the UK. It's 193 years old, and it has long-standing relationships with the community. And I was always desperate and taken over to figure out how we could best engage with our communities, and where we've taken this in a number of different ways, but specifically in the work we've done with GiveWith, which for those of you who don't know is a social value impact organization, where we've been able to divert value from our commercial arrangements with suppliers to supporting grassroots organizations in London. And both of those are ultimately helping communities make the right life choices. And if we can make the right life choices, we're diverting people away from crime. And so far, we launched GiveWith into our processes in the autumn of 2020. We've identified £750,000, which we can now divert to grassroots organisations. One is to an organisation called Groundwork, which is supporting sustainable development in communities. And Red Thread is helping youngsters get out of, a violent life, and supporting people through that. And we're looking at other organisations now as well, through the help with our uniformed officers, of support and engagement with local communities.
Brilliant. Okay, and say there's, you're going to hear three different stories here, and I'll come to. Somebody's put the hand up early for a question, but I'm going to wait till we've had the quick intros from each of the team. But it's a great example of new business models being deployed to support technology and also sustainable procurement. Tom, have you got a few words about what's gone well for you over the last next sort of couple of years?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess to give a bit of context as to where GSK is at on this sustainability journey and how we're looking to use tech. So we set two very, very ambitious sustainability goals at the back end of 2020. So we have net zero impact on climate by 2030 and net positive impact on nature by 2030. And when we talk about nature, we're broadly talking water, waste and biodiversity. So reflecting on those targets, really ambitious for a couple of reasons. One is the timescales. 2030 is not very far away. When you look at a lot of net zero targets, you tend to see sort of 2040, 2050. So we want to move really quickly. It's also very ambitious in terms of the scope. So both of those targets are set across our entire value chain. So we know we're going to have to partner incredibly closely with our suppliers and help our suppliers if we're going to have any chance of meeting those by 2030. So what we've looked to do and what I wanted to discuss today was the implementation of a tool called Manufacture 2030, which is a company we've partnered with to look at how we can partner with our suppliers on scope 3. So how we can help to understand key impact areas, how we can understand current levels of maturity, and also how we can understand how we're able to help suppliers, because we really want to take a partnership approach to this and look at how we can use what our learnings and our expertise to help our suppliers to accelerate their improvement. So quick taster on there. Hope I could jump into a bit more detail later on.
Yeah, I mean, what were maybe the one or two things that have gone really, really well so far?
Yeah, so I think that one of the key successes for us and what can often be one of the bigger challenges is getting that internal engagement and buy-in, particularly within procurement specifically. So I think we've done a great job of explaining the business case for sustainability to our procurement leadership team. So we are at a point now where we have set targets across each of our procurement categories to get, first of all, to get key suppliers onto our Manufacture 2030 system. And then secondly, really to use it as a business as usual tool. So in the same way our procurement teams would talk about price, they talk about supply, they talk about quality. This tech and the data we'll collect through Manufacture 2030 becomes another sort of key tool and key set of data which our procurement professionals use to drive change. So that first bit is the leadership buy-in. And then I think the second piece has been around how we've explained the tool to suppliers. So I think, and GSK have been guilty of this in the past, but I think there's a huge amount of surveys and questions asked and sort of data requested of suppliers without always a clear so what and what's the value proposition for submitting that data. I think we've done a good job now of understanding what we want to do with the data and how we can support our suppliers. So I think those are probably the two key success factors so far.
Cool, thanks Tom. And then Jen, a couple of words about what you've been up to and what's gone well. That's Jen again. She's just frozen for a couple of minutes, so we'll keep on going. I think what you'll see is we've got three different examples here of where technology's been explored. And Jen, you're back, brilliant. So it's just a quick one. So what's gone well for you with regards to the technology and technology adoption?
Yeah, I think one of the things for us is that we leverage our technology to help others. And one of the, I think, really unique opportunities that we have is to look across Google and all of the technologies that we have. And one of the places where we felt like there was a real opportunity was in leveraging geospatial and some of our work on Earth observation and leveraging that to help and enable procurement teams within the customers that we engage with. And so we have a great example of that where we were able to bring the technology that's been trusted by tens of thousands of researchers and academics over the years to look at deforestation, to look at watersheds, and to look at how that is impacting procurement. I think that has gone, really well in the sense that we've been able to bring new technology to a problem that has been historically very challenging to solve from a procurement perspective. And I think the next phase is really to continue to look at how we democratize the access to that data. But we took inspiration from some work that had been done, for those of you who might be aware, in Global Fishing Watch, where we were able to both take Earth observation data, geospatial data, and marry it with machine learning so that we could start to look at inferred behavior as opposed to perhaps historically by trusted behavior. So I think this has been a really unique opportunity for us, particularly in these complex supply chains where there's a lot of layers removed from the direct source. And so being able to get a better visibility to what's happening in that first mile has been something that we've really been excited about and looking to see how we can expand this further.
Brilliant. I mean, and the way I often see the application of technology in sustainable procurement is that it is truly the frontier, where new business models, new technologies, the combination of technologies, or the application of ideas is cracking problems that previously couldn't be cracked. And it's very, 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 very powerful from that perspective. But if you were to kind of, individually kind of think about, well, what's next? How can we crack the next thing? Where are you looking to take the relationship you've got with the existing technology over the next couple of years? How are you either going to make a scale or go into a different category or different area? I don't know, Mark, I'll come back to you again just to ask that. What next?
Well, for us, we spend £850 million a year in supporting the operation of the organisation. If we can divert an ever-increasing percentage of that towards, supporting the causes we've identified, supporting the causes of organisations that help the Met achieve its organisation, you can have a massive, massive impact. You think of some of these grassroots organisations that haven't had levels of funding sustained for a period of time. We've had a tough couple of years. We actually had to delay our implementation because of COVID. We signed the deal in March 2020, but we were nowhere ready to launch that. So for us, we've broken into majority of our categories, and we've got to that level of investment we have. I want to get to 7 figures at least. And I want to keep going. I want to go to 8 figures. I want this to get to a point where we are diverting value from, and not just monetary value. That's the thing here. We're looking at how can we get people back into employment? How can we support people get into employment for the first time? How can we, ensure people are receiving a full and fair wage? How are we making sure organizations are being paid in the right time scales? This is one element of it, but if you kind of take this, it has a massive, massive multiplier effect in supporting and sustaining both businesses, communities, families, and individuals in what has been a very, very difficult time, and what will continue to be so as we recover from COVID. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, you touched upon it a little bit in the first question there, but are there things which you're going to have to do to unlock that, to get beyond the 750 to the 1 million? Are there other things in terms of getting people involved or changes to technology? Or
no, I think the technology, the concept is universally understood now. It's just getting people, procurement people are sometimes a little bit, okay, I know this works for me. I'm going to carry on plowing this for the rest of my days. Okay. Whereas, let's try to do something a little bit different. For us, it was perfect timing. We just implemented a whole new operating model, a whole new set of ways of working. For this was just to plug that in as part of that. And we're producing case studies. We're talking about the impact this is having within societies. Everyone's now thinking, how can we be part of that? Our suppliers themselves are seeing these case studies being talked about in that, and when we go out and say, okay, well, this organization and this organization, They are seeing the value, and in some cases, suppliers are coming to us and saying, "Well, can you broaden the number of organisations you support and to support our aspirations as well, and what we're doing?" So I think the technology is fine. It's just the case of getting people into the new way of working, seeing, this is a thing that is not to be feared, to be embraced, and really for us, this makes us closer to the purpose of the organisation.
Yes, fantastic. And Tom, for you, as you're kind of working with Manufacturing 2030, getting the collaboration up, how do you get that to really scale? Or, are you thinking about a different direction or a step change in what you're doing? As you say, there's quite hairy targets in front of you. So
certainly is. Yeah, so I think we've broadly kind of got a 5-step plan we would like to work our way through with Manufacture 2030. I think the first step and one of our key challenges been really trying to get to the best and most accurate level of data we possibly can. So moving away from desktop-based Scope 3 assessments, moving away from high-level PowerPoint presentations when we have conversations with suppliers towards granular primary GSK focused data. What are the carbon emissions coming from your specific manufacturer, which you're doing for GSK? So that's what we want to get to first, is that really granular level of data, because that's what allows you to really drive improvement. The second thing we want to do, and I think it comes hand in hand with that, is to try and be a little bit more specific with our strategy and how we engage with our suppliers. So through the collection of that data, the targets, the improvement plans our suppliers have in place, we're going to end up with different groups. There'll be some suppliers who are as mature, possibly better, probably better than GSK on sustainability, where it's not a case of us holding their hand and telling them everything we've done across our sites. It's what can we learn from you, and what problems can we try and address together within our joint supply chain to try and reduce carbon. There will probably be another group of suppliers who are fairly early on the sustainability journey and can probably learn from our own experience from our program. So it's making sure we have the dedicated time and resources to be able to share all of our learnings, all of our best practices, so that we can help them to accelerate their improvement. So that second step is all about trying to engage with suppliers in the right way, so that we're having the best possible collaboration. I think we then want to understand what are the opportunities. So we want to know kind of what are the areas or what are the challenges that are stopping our suppliers improving as quickly as we'd like them to. So is it access to capital? Is it that it's not seen as a priority internally? Is it local infrastructure? What are the challenges, so that we can look at how can GSK, how can groups of pharmaceutical companies through the likes of PSCI and PEG start to pick up and try and unlock some of these challenges. So a really nice example, which I've spoken about at SPP in the past, is our Energize program, which we've set up with Schneider Electric to help our suppliers to move towards renewable energy. That program's fantastic, but we want to know what is the next Energize, and we're really hoping the data and the conversations that will come off the back of the data will help us to unpick and unlock that next opportunity. We then obviously want to implement them, as many as we can, when we know what those opportunities are, which is the exciting bit. And then finally, we want to be able to use that data to set specific targets with our suppliers in terms of delivery. I think with sustainability, where we'd like to get to is it's seen as you'd look at quality, as you'd look at price, you have KPIs that what you look to deliver. And I think we'd like to get to a really specific carbon reduction target with each of our suppliers for that GSK specific manufacturer. So quite a lot to do, but we've got these ambitious targets. So we're really hoping the tech will help us to get there.
Right. We've got a quick question here as well from Alexandra Farr, which how does the GSK Energize project work? Are you okay to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, certainly. So Energize has been set up by GSK and 9 other pharmaceutical companies who are part of PEG, which is the Pharmaceutical Environment Group. And we've brought in Schneider Electric as kind of our expert energy consultant to help lead that group. I think there was a general recognition across all of the companies within the Energize team that for a lot of our suppliers, they either, it's quite a new topic for them, so they need a little bit of help understanding what are the different routes to renewable energy, which one's going to be best suited to them, and actually who do I even speak to start that journey? And for other suppliers, they actually simply don't have enough electrical load across their sites, particularly if we're talking indirect suppliers, to find a really commercially viable way towards renewable energy. So what we've set up with Schneider and with the rest of the Energize group is really a program to try and address those two issues. So the first part of the program, which is completely free for suppliers to participate in, is a sort of 10-week workshop capability building series delivered by Schneider Electric that GSK and the other 9 pharma companies have paid with, covering all the topics you'd need to know to help you understand why should I move to renewable energy, which is the best option, and how do I go about doing it. So the aim is suppliers come out the other side with all that information and they're ready to go. The second part of the program, which is optional but is a really, really good offering, is Schneider Electric will actually then bring together and convene a buying cohort for suppliers who are interested in moving towards power purchase agreements, virtual power purchase agreements. They will bring the suppliers together, they'll aggregate the demands, and they'll actually go out and lead a tendering and identify viable projects to move towards renewable energy via a PPA. So absolutely fantastic for suppliers, because you've got aggregated demand, so you're going to get a commercially better deal than if you went out yourself. You've got an expert holding your hand through what is a really complicated process, and as well as having brilliant sustainability credentials, we should also see commercial benefits from suppliers in the switch as well. So fairly early days in the program, but we're hoping it'll have a really good impact for our suppliers.
Yeah, I mean, you've answered there's another question here about KPIs. What were the KPIs? Obviously, savings is one of them, so that's ticking the box. Any other key KPIs for the Energize program?
Well, within Energize, really, what the main thing we're looking to do is reduce carbon. So that's going to be the main thing we're tracking from an Energize group perspective. We want to remove as much carbon as we possibly can by helping our supply chains to move towards renewable energy. From a supplier perspective, you're absolutely right. There'll be commercial benefits that they can track, but our key KPI is how much carbon can we reduce from pharmaceutical supply chains.
Lance, if I may,
go for it.
We didn't set any deliberately, just to get this, because I think if people, we're all at different stages in our respective organizations as we sit here and listen today. Sometimes setting a KPI too early can take it away. It just won't progress. So I deliberately didn't do that. I just thought, let's just try it, let's get it in, and let's see. Because the whole, we had to get the messaging across that suppliers that were willing to divert value would be treated equally as well as those that didn't want to. This couldn't be seen as a final decision making who we award business to. So that was one thing in terms of the external. The internals, we're going to let this run. We're going to see where it takes us, and have taken that. Some organisations, I completely fully understand, will want to do that, but I made the conscious decision not to do that.
Yeah, that's good. And I think that's often the starting point. And you say often organisations will drive you down to the KPIs, but I think you've got to start with that intent.
You look at the long term. This is a long game.
Yeah, agree. Great addition. Well, thanks. Jen, just coming to you with the same question. If you're looking at the programs you're running now on sort of gathering that geospatial data, how are they going to scale? How is the data becoming more accessible? What does better look like?
Yeah, I wanted to kind of go back. I think Mark mentioned this idea that sort of have to challenge our status quo. That's a term that we use inside of Google a lot. Are we continuing to challenge what we assume is a status quo today? And I think that's really important. And then I think, Maria mentioned in the chat message around collaboration. I think when we think about geospatial, that it kind of ticks a lot of those boxes, which is to say it's not necessarily, a democratized capability within procurement teams today, but we believe similar to like how, sort of maps has transformed how we navigate vehicles. We see this Earth observation as being a really key function for procurement in the future, particularly as we think about globally distributed commodities. To your point, being able to do one thing in one region isn't spectacularly new. it's really doing that at a global scale and empowering those procurement people to do their function, with the efficiency that we have grown to appreciate, but with new capabilities and with the capability to do that in a way that adapts to the function that you're performing. I think the other thing that I would add here, though, is that it isn't, I think one of the things that we've done within procurement often is get into silos where, we had these very distinct handoffs. I think what sustainability really challenges us to think about is how complex the ecosystem really is around procurement. And that we really need to start thinking about that, what Maria mentioned, collaboration, and I think Tom just mentioned it in terms of the work with Energize. It's really about collaborating to move the ecosystem, to move the complexity. For us, it is also important that we focus. So if you try to tackle everything all at once, it's going to be extraordinarily difficult. And so what we've tried to do within the work that we're doing is really focus on delivering value and doing it through collaboration. We're seeing new joint ventures be formed that challenge sort of our competitive boundaries historically, because this is really the world we live in, is we all contribute to the complex ecosystem and we all have to evolve with the complex ecosystem. And so geospatial allows us to see data, to gather some of that data that historically has been extraordinarily challenging and quite expensive to gather individually. And so if we can gather that and share it collaboratively and then evolve the ecosystem. So bringing in the researchers and the academics to help build the models of the future that we all can take advantage of. It's often, like what the early days of machine learning, we're starting to go through that now with these other data sources that are just proliferating, the sensors, the satellites. So we see this as being a really key function that, we're continuing to push forward and try to democratize that capability so that it is in the hands of all the procurement folks.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm going to come back to those points in a minute, but Oliver, I just thought you arrived a little bit late to the session. I find that completely unacceptable, considering your discipline. No, but I completely understand at the same time. I'm just joking. But you've been on a number of different sessions during the day today. How do you connect? All the different themes together with what's happening from a digital perspective. How important do you see digitalization, data, software, analytics being in bringing all of those things to scale and to speed,
Yeah, good question. And I think one thing that has been mentioned in almost every session I've been in has been data. And I think the phrase, you can't manage what you don't measure, has been mentioned about 15 million times. The thing is, I think I have a particular bugbear about that, but I think it's right that procurement and it's right that businesses are focused on measurement, because measurement is key. And obviously you need data in order to have good measurement. But one of the big challenges is obviously if you just focus on measurement and get completely bogged down in measurement, you never actually improve. And when it comes to scope 3, I've said this many times, but you need the number to go down. You don't need it to just be more accurate. So I think that's a really sort of important challenge. And I think it's the same when, Mark, when you've talked about, ultimately social impact and those KPIs piece. This is about protecting people's lives and doing things that are right and helping people in the supply chain. It isn't about collecting the numbers necessarily. We're only not about that. So I think data is absolutely key, and technology helps with that, of course. But I think the technology providers themselves have got a lot to answer for in terms of making sure that that data is easily shareable, that it isn't just behind closed walls, that you can collaborate and use that data, that you can put it in other tools and things like that. I've got a quick question just for Jen and as reflectors Google, but also Tom and Mark. How do you go about choosing the right technologies and the right, for instance, data platforms, especially on scope 3? Because there's a million out there, and I'm sure most people on the call have been bombarded with tools and seen a million demos. So how have you sort of identified what tools to use? And Jen, how do you cope with just this enormous number of technologies and ideas out there? How do you manage to sort of deal with it all? So I don't know if that's a question to all three of you, I think.
Yeah, I'm certainly happy to jump in, and I would love to hear Mark and Tom's point of view as well. I think a couple of things that you raised. One, you raised the data and the sharing of data, and we see the the ecosystem of data growing very rapidly in this space. And some folks on the chat message mentioned, insurance and financials, and we're seeing all of these players, the data is just starting to expand. And so I think that in and of itself raises a challenge. You can be bombarded and inundated with data. And so being able to make sure that you have the capability to manage data effectively and to find useful insights in the data is super important. We're starting to see a lot of people building ESG specific sort of data platforms where they might not have to take all of their legacy of the existing data platforms, but really start afresh almost. And we're seeing that quite a bit. And the capabilities that are needed around that also evolve, because much of this data might be in spreadsheets or PDFs or, and so in many different flavors, and how you pull data out of that is also really important. We are, ourselves talking about, if you shift from a model of reporting maybe optionally annually to a requirement that makes it happen on a more of a financial time clock, for example, you have to really rethink how you're doing that, because oftentimes people are doing it in a very manual way today, that's not going to be possible in the future. And so these are I really feel like you have to start with a focus on what is the business trying to accomplish and how do we make that progress, and then marry up the technology to that, because oftentimes I think we like to think of it as just technology problems, when in fact, and I think, I can't remember if it was Mark or Tom mentioned this, oftentimes the people and the process part have to go along with it. And I think we all say that and we all know that, but actually really putting that into practice is really important. And I think for us, we're always focused on prioritizing, because you just can't do everything as much as you want to. Really prioritizing on where you can, make progress. And many of the things that we have done over the course of time, I mean, if you think about Google and our use of energy, we go back, our carbon neutrality goes back to 2007. And much of that was done through, for example, carbon offsetting programs. We see that as a bridge to the carbon-free work we're now really championing within the ecosystem. So there's going to be these bridges as well to get us to the promised land. It's not going to be, a whole scale shift all at once. We don't believe. We believe that we're going to need some of these transitional technologies as well. So I don't know, hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight into how we're thinking about it.
Mark or Tom, any thoughts on the questionnaire from Oliver in terms of the process of kind of choosing good technology or best technology?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. So I think really the key decision factor for us was what you mentioned, Ollie. We don't just want to keep measuring and measuring and measuring. We want to actually do something about it, and that's something that we felt was really prominent within Manufacture 2030 that we chose in the end. So yes, the data collection is an aspect of it, but really the focus for us is, okay, what insights do we then take from that data? And how do we actually help our supplier to improve? So what are the barriers? What are the challenges they're currently facing? What have we learned across our own manufacturing that we can share? So really that focus on improvement was key. I think the actual process itself was a lot of consultation essentially. So we wanted to make sure everybody that the system was going to interface had an input into what we needed to do. So it's obviously procurement, but it's also speaking to our sustainability team. It's speaking to the likes of our finance colleagues. I think that's a key challenge for us, is how do we take all this environmental data and try and put some sort of cost of ownership around it, so that when procurement people are making decisions, sustainability data is a part of it, and we're really considering that total cost of ownership. So it was quite a complex process, but we're happy that we've chosen a solution that helps us focus on improving.
Yeah, Lance, in fact, I've had some people even on this call trying to sell me stuff as we go now. So I admire their entrepreneurial spirit. I think it really depends on the maturity of the organization at a particular point and what business need you're trying to fill. For us, the social value piece was where we thought we could have an immediate impact, and where we were in terms of our maturity. We've got the largest fleet of vehicles in London, so we're trying to look at things now in terms of EVs and net zero in a different way. So it really depends on, I think, on the business problem each organization is ultimately trying to address. And I think, this is, as I said, this is a long game. you know, and there are organizations coming to the table on an ever increasing basis with some really, really smart capabilities. And I think we're all looking at that and trying to figure out, okay, where does that fit our need for that? And I think we've all got to keep our eyes open, be good commercial procurement people in finding the right solutions.
Yeah. But an interesting question, which is somewhat related to, Oliver, to your question about, you know, what are the factors, which is a classic question is, you know, which comes first? Is it the technology, the process? You know, from Avanish is, you know, do you have to fix the process first, or can you step straight into a digital solution? Don't know what the thoughts are on Mark on that, or Tom, Jennifer.
Well, perhaps I'll lead off. I think in some cases, perhaps the closer it is to an established process, the easier it is for people to accept. You know, we're suddenly bringing something in really, really, and I suppose it depends again where you are. If for us, we were new processes, new ways of working. The ability then to land that as part of that as a new way of progressing was an easier task and perhaps something a little bit more mature. That's our humble opinions on that.
Okay.
I would echo that from a GSK perspective. So we're very complex. We've got more than enough processes. I think what we want to do is try and look at how we use the technology, how we use the data to embed sustainability into the processes we already have in place. And as I was kind of alluding to just there, how we create sustainability and how we have it in a language which makes sense to procurement, and they see it as a value creation activity for the business rather than a sort of extracurricular nice to have. So I think it's applying the technology and embedding it into our existing procurement processes.
Jen?
Maybe I'll add a yes and. I think one of the things that we're also seeing is that the traditional approach of sort of supplier attestation down the value chain is requiring some new and additional mechanisms of requiring data or of supplementing with data. So I think that it's a yes and. I think some of the existing processes are probably, you know, tried and true, but I do think that there's going to be new requirements, new things are going to have to evolve, new partnerships, new data sharing. And of course, with data sharing requires, there's often sensitive data that needs to be, you know, figured out how we share it collaboratively, but also yet with all the constraints around confidentiality. So I think it's a yes and. There's going to be a much broader effort around sharing data down the value chain.
Yeah, it's interesting your observation there, Jen, about it's not just that capability trade-off, but it's the ethics of ethics. You know what I mean? You're pushing the boundaries of what's right and wrong as well. Yeah, great. Yeah, you got your hand up there. I don't know whether it's up because we're out of time or
oh, sorry, I forgot. No, it's just an interesting point, just slightly back to what you were saying about measuring data, and what Oliver's, you know, kind of the thing that's come up consistently is that you can't, you know, you need to have the data, you need something to measure. And one thing that came up in the modern slavery session that we did was just this idea that actually we're in a moment of change for the way the procurement function is viewed, in the sense that it was, you know, from a finance, you know, from the CFO's perspective, we're here for the value that we bring is the savings. And so it was all about measuring what the savings were. And now we're actually saying, well, actually, we're now so much more, the value that we bring, and we have to, if we're only measuring what the savings are, then obviously the impact into all of our contracts, the way we negotiate there was one comment made about how actually when you have the conversation with your suppliers about ring fencing the living wage comment, about how actually in understanding when you get to a point in negotiation financially, if you drive it to a certain point, then it's going to impact the wages that, you know, it's going to come out of, and that, you know, the implications all round in terms of, you know, the product or whatever it is, the service being procured. So it was just that comment, actually, just how your conversation and the technology to help us measure are we measuring the right thing? So I guess the systems thinking, isn't it, about really understanding what is it that we're measuring, and you know, and that we're measuring the right thing to put it in the right context.
Yeah. And ultimately, I agree 100%. It's that change of to creating new value by doing new things as well. Linked to that, there's a quick question here. I'll come back to in a minute, Oliver. There's a quick question here about with that new value and the new digitalization, what new skills are people having to learn? I mean, Mark, have you found that you've had to build new skills or a new frame of mind with the team, or is it?
So I think from our perspective, there had been an inadequacy in developing our people. So there was a natural inclination to learn as much as you can and embrace this. I think for all of us as a profession, we are in an era of the digital native, and the workforce that we are all hiring as we move forward is inherently wired differently to a number of people on this call, probably the large majority of people on this call. This is a generation that's coming through that have grown up instantly dialed in and liking each other and social community. So I think for all of us, I think this makes the profession more attractive, and I think that the talent the generation of talent coming through will be able to be more adaptable far quicker than perhaps those who had to adapt to it as a new way of working. They'll just embrace it and run with it.
Jen, have you seen new skills being developed or acquired?
And I would agree here with Mark. I mean, I think yes, and there's a lot of the creativity comes from this generation that has grown up with the digital tools. Like, you're asking, why don't we use this in procurement? If you look at some of our traditional procurement tools, they feel very archaic to some of these, to this next generation. And so I think this is something that's going to require us all to evolve and listen to some of the ideas, because I think that's where we will find this. I mentioned earlier, how do we challenge our existing status quo? A lot of it will come from people who have lived a very different, or have grown up in a very different environment. So I know that, many people are investing in upskilling, and in trying to make sure that we're developing, our employees for what we see coming in the future. And a lot of the capabilities we're trying to develop are also trying to serve very, very deep technical sort of capabilities within the realm of the workers. So like, we shouldn't all have to be data scientists to be able to leverage machine learning or AI. And that's something that I think is really important that we all think through as well, is how do we bring these new capabilities in a way that's accessible? And I think someone mentioned that on the chat earlier. I completely agree. I think we need to do that. And we need to listen to some of these, some of the people that come in and challenge why we do things the way we do today, and try to find really good common ground of how we evolve in the future.
Great. Tom, anything to add to that? Or?
Yeah, I think completely echo the comments around the technology, and it's equally on the sort of sustainability capability internally in our procurement function as well as a massive topic for us. I think it's nice working in sustainability because a lot of people are passionate about it. A lot of people are interested in it out of work and see the importance of it. What we need to do now is really arm the procurement function with the knowledge they need, so that when the data, the insights, the conversations start happening with suppliers around sustainability, they have that confidence to be able to drive those conversations and talk about performance and help identify opportunities. So that's an area of internal capability we're really focusing on, and hopefully will become a sort of key skill expected across procurement functions across businesses as well.
Right, got you. Sorry, Oliver, you had a question there.
Really, no, I think Miguel actually had asked the same question. I mean, something that you raised, Lance, in your brilliant kind of 2022 reflections as ProcureTech was the importance of the supplier experience. So I think traditionally technologies and data platforms have been built with lovely dashboards for buyers to use and all of the sort of gadgets and widgets for the buyers. But suppliers have got to get value in tools, and suppliers have got to get a good experience, and they've been bombarded with lots of different tools. I think Miguel's question is brilliant around that. So I think, conscious of time, but it'd be interesting to see what that's been the experience, whether it's been, you know, satellite imaging, or it's been what you've been doing, Tom or Mark. How do you help the supplier get value from these technologies?
I'm happy to have a go first. I think that is a key challenge still across the pharmaceutical supply chain. I think one thing we try to do is get the big pharma companies round a table and come to a decision, which is a very hard thing to do. We're all quite difficult to herd. But if we can all align on using one tool, one broadly aligned set of questions, it at least starts to make life a little bit easier for suppliers, and the fact they're getting one set of questions once a year instead of 20. The other piece as well is moving away from this just collecting the data for external reporting or to chuck in PowerPoints, but to be really clear about what the supplier is going to get out of putting that data in. It takes time. Quite often these platforms cost money for them to do as well. So there needs to be a really clear value proposition. And as I mentioned earlier, Energize is a great example of how we're trying to make it not just give us your data, fill out this survey, but trying to help suppliers to solve problems. I think it's that solution piece that we're hoping is the key encourager for suppliers to take part.
So with the last couple of minutes we've got here, one of the things I was thinking about was well, what is next? So we talked about technology and, you know, and how it's affecting things now. You know, what do you think's next? What's the thing that's coming over the brow of the hill that you're most excited about its potential from a technology perspective or digitalization perspective? Do you have a what next?
I'm happy to have a go.
Go for it. Yeah.
So one thing we're really interested in, but haven't really figured out a great way to implement yet, is blockchains. I think we've had a lot of discussions internally about what might we use blockchain within our supply chain. So whether that's looking at some of the high risk materials that we procure, and in a similar way to that Jen's described, try to have some level of traceability and accountability of where those materials are coming from and what the supply chain looks like using that technology. And the second one is also looking at contracts. So how can we use blockchain to build smart contracts where the data feeds in automatically, and if suppliers aren't meeting requirements around sustainability, around carbon, energy, water, waste, can we start to automate that process of understanding when a target hasn't been met and what the implications are using blockchain? So I think that with a fairly limited understanding of it, it feels like there's massive opportunities around blockchain, and we need to look at how we can leverage it.
Lance, if I may go next, I think rather than looking at what's next, I would encourage everybody to let's get the value of what we've done. Like, for everybody listening today, what is the ROI on your investment? You know, I've done a number of different technological things in this area, and I'm seeing things coming around that I did a decade ago. You know, and we as procurement professionals who have to guarantee the sanctity of the investments made by our organizations, we do spend a lot of money on the same things more than once. Yeah, so let's get the ROI. And I'd be intrigued to know, does everybody know the ROI for their technological investments? Yeah, let's get that right.
I agree. And I would say the difference between now versus 10 years ago, the ROI can be a lot quicker as well than it has been in the past, by taking those intermediary steps, Jen, that you mentioned. You know, you don't have to jump to the final solution. It can be a step journey to get there. But yeah, it's a good point, Mark. But having said that,
well, I would add one thing.
Next.
I'm super excited about some of the capabilities that we have coming down the pipeline. But one of the things that I think, you know, if I look at some of Google, our work on shooting for carbon-free 24/7, one of the things that was highlighted in doing that, in setting that ambitious goal, was really that we didn't have an hour-by-hour view, you know, of where energy, what the, you know, the CFE of energy was on an hour-by-hour basis. And so therefore, maybe you get an aggregated view over long periods of time, but we weren't really getting the hour by hour. So like by setting that goal, it actually drove us to start to look at what data needed to be collected and made available for everyone to start to look at it on an hour by hour and really shift the way you approach the problem from what our traditional approach was to a more refined way. And then all the tools and the ecosystem will evolve. So I guess one of the things that I'm really eager to see is, as we're setting some of these ambitious goals, what are the steps we're taking, to really start to think about the gaps that we have and how we're going to fill those? Because I can tell you that going and instrumenting, every single thing in the world is going to take a long time, and it's going to be very expensive. But that's why I'm excited about some of the geospatial capabilities. It allows us to get a lot of information with satellites and sensors that are already available. So you don't have to have that huge, when you talk about ROI, if the first piece is invest a whole bunch of money to go and instrument, we're in a world of hurt. If we can already gather quite a bit of data to give us the view of where we need to go with precision, I think that to me is going to be really game changing. And that's why I'm really excited about this space. Is I think we can then go in with the tools and capabilities to do things at a more granular level where it makes the most sense to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Bit more tailored. So I'm going to bring things to a bit of a close. We've got 2 minutes left, and just like to sort of, see if there's any final words from the panel. Anything you'd like to leave us with before we move to the next session?
Don't let perfection hinder progress.
There you go. Wise words.
Amen. Very true for running the SPP as well.
There you go. Well, listen, I mean, you've shared some wonderful insights over the last 60 minutes. We've managed to answer most of the questions. Sorry, we've not managed to answer all of them, but there is lots more to come. All of the sessions have been recorded, we look forward to doing this all again next year. Already excited about next year. I'll hand it back now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lance. That was fantastic. And Oliver, so great you could join us in the end. But no, brilliant. It's been an absolute phenomenal day and another fantastic session. So thank you so much, panel. It's been brilliant to hear your insights. We've got quite a few sessions still to go, so we hope that you will stay with us and join in the next to come. And like I said, we will be downloading the chat and making sure it gets on the website. So all the fantastic questions and interactions in the chat, we'll make sure we've captured all of that. Oliver, is there anything you want to add?
No, just thank you, Lance. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Mark. You've all three of you been supportive in a number of different ways other than this session. So huge thanks. And Lance, brilliant. Let's keep working together. And thank you for everyone that's been listening as well.
All right, brilliant. Thank you, everybody.
Cheers,
have a lovely
guys.
evening. Take care.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.